Good afternoon. Welcome to the Rural Colorado Debate Pre-Debate Analysis. I'm Jay Seaton, publisher of the Grand Junction Daily Sentinel, and I will serve as moderator of today's discussion. I'm joined today by my colleagues from newspapers on the western side of the Continental Divide, here on the campus of Colorado Mesa University. Also with us is Mr. Jerry Rahal of the Glenwood Springs Post-Independent, Renee Campbell from the Craig Press, Tanya Maddox from the Montrose Press, and Mr. Richard Ballantyne from the Durango Herald. These fine people represent historic rural newspapers that reflect their respective communities. Today's discussion is meant to frame issues that are important to the rural Colorado voters and highlight issues that are likely points of discussion between Jared Polis and Walker Stapleton in the upcoming debate here at CMU on October 6th. With that, let's jump right into what may be the driving issue of this, purpose of this very debate, and that is the tale of two states in the state of Colorado. And what we know is from over the last 10 years, 95% of the growth in the state from a population standpoint has occurred in the counties along the I-25 corridor, and the rest of the state has been sort of left out from the growth and largesse of the last 8 or 9 years in this state. So while we've got booming economies on the Front Range, the rest of the state is a patchwork of decent to good to really struggling. So that's the issue that I think a lot of us would like to see these governor candidates take on, and this is a multifaceted issue, and so I wonder if we can try to frame what we would like these governor candidates to discuss at their debate. So Jerry, I'll punt to you and ask you what do you think we can do here?
Well, I think it's a holistic approach when we're looking at what the candidates can and cannot do. We're talking about the economic disparity between the Front Range and here, and it's not going to be solved by just further economics options or privileges or motivation to do so. I think that will certainly help with that, but we need to be looking at holistic approaches to education, infrastructure, and how we can do that. So I'm really hoping that the governor candidates, as they come here, will address those things about how on the western slope as well as the eastern slope communities, things that they can do and the plans that they have on how to drive economic resources that are not just based on economics, but lifestyle and infrastructure.
You've got a Front Range that's growing at a pace that really, I think, leads the nation in terms of economic development. And you've got, it's growing at such a pace that, in fact, I think it's outgrowing some of its infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And so you've got, the rest of the state with plenty of infrastructure and land and water that is perhaps ripe for development, but is not enjoying the benefits of the growth that is occurring on the Front Range. Renee, can you fill us in from Craig?
I can say that our community is really, it's gone down. I look at the census figures, and we've lost a couple thousand people, and I just feel like the governor, when you're looking at the issues for the entire state, we need to be looking at, as Jerry said, education. We need to be looking at economic development for the entire state. We need to be looking at tourism for the entire state. And I just feel like the West Slope has so much to offer, and I feel like a lot of times we get overlooked.
I think it's a mutually beneficial opportunity here for us to, as the Denver Metro, the Front Range, is being overburdened. We have resources in western Colorado. We have resources on the eastern slope. So this is if it's done right, it's a win-win, where we can relieve some of the stress that the metro area is receiving, but also bring economic development into our communities.
Right.
So part of the reason the I-25 corridor is growing so robustly is because they have high educational attainment in those regions and has the highest percentage of under 30 college graduates in the country. And so education is paramount in Western Colorado if we want to attain that same kind of development. Tanya, help us see the perspective from Montrose.
Sure. I'm going to start with, I think it's important for these, during the gubernatorial debates to hear from the candidates to find out if they believe that there truly is two states within Colorado. And I think arguably we can say there could be even three when you look at the resort communities. So when I look at all of that and I take Montrose County, when I look at Montrose County, I know that, to answer your question, education is a large problem. Although we have a CMU extension there, our young people, they are either getting educated elsewhere, they'll go to Grand Junction or even to the Front Range or out of the state. But guess what, Jay? They don't come back. They are being educated elsewhere and then they leave and they are not coming back to the communities that they grew up in. And so that obviously is a concern to the residents there. And I believe that the candidates need to, it would be beneficial for them to address education and growth in communities and how we look at Colorado as a state. Is it really a dual state, or are there really three components, and how do we communicate to those three components?
Tanya, what do you see as the bottleneck to development? What's the greatest bottleneck to development in Western Colorado in your view?
Gosh. Oh, there's so many, but I think that's a tough question because I believe that income plays affordable income and affordable living plays a huge role in rural Colorado. People can't afford to live here. And let's take Montrose as an example. We have a very large retired population. But guess what? The folks that serve our meals when we go out, to dinner, the people that are working in the retail locations, they can't afford to live here. And so, I think that that's one of the issues that I'd like to see the candidates address, is how do we make it affordable statewide?
Richard, you have perhaps the longest view in this room of education funding and how it impacts Western Colorado, in particular, along with some ballot initiatives that have occurred over the course of time. And could you give us a perspective from your neck of the woods?
Well, I think it's absolutely important that a community have good schools, and we need to put whatever resources are necessary into that. I tend to think that you need to have a 5-day school week, and when you get to higher education, we've got Fort Lewis College in Durango. You need to be certain you've got small classes, particularly for those freshmen and sophomores who maybe first generation and need some extra time and need some extra relationships with their faculty members. That if we statewide can develop a strong K through 12 education system, I think we are going to move even farther toward the forefront of education in this country.
I wonder if there are other tools at the state's disposal or at the disposal of a future governor of this state to incentivize economic development in rural Colorado. For example, the biggest tools at the state level are the job growth incentive tax credit and some other incentive dollars to incentivize businesses to move to the state. But the overwhelming majority of those dollars have been deployed on the Front Range, with very, very little coming outside of that region. Is this something that we think that the future governor of Colorado could put his thumb on the? I guess we're going to say he, because we know that 2 candidates are male, but put his thumb on the scale here. Renee, what do you think?
I think definitely yes, and per a conversation we had a little bit ago, in talking about it, inviting the whoever becomes our governor to actually spend time in all of the communities, and not just a day visit, but actually look at spending some real time in the different rural communities and seeing what the community is all about, and really looking at what they could do as far as what economic growth, what businesses could come to the areas to actually support what's already there and help grow it as well.
I would agree with that. And I would say, Renee, that I believe that if these candidates come and visit, they're going to redefine economic development, because it's going to look different in the rural areas than it does on the Front Range.
So, Jerry, I'm going to pose this question to you. The Romer administration employed something called Dome on the Range, where it moved. The administration visited various areas of the state through the course of his administration. I'm going to take it a step further. What about moving the capital outside of Denver for at least a period of time into communities like Craig, Glenwood, or the Eastern Plains?
You mean more than just a day visit and kind of saying what we want to hear and then moving on?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, I don't know the logistics of it. Certainly there's ways that the communities could probably work with the governor candidates and bring forth housing options and building options for them to work from there. But, I mean, something's got to be tried to create an understanding of what it is like. I mean, and I understand that when you have the vast majority of your resources tied up in one area, you're going to spend more time there. But I think the other side of it is they're missing out on a great opportunity, an untapped market that will, again, as I said earlier, benefit both sides of the equation tremendously. And I think if they start to look around, and I think all these things are connected, consistently connected, whether it's economic development, if they can look at that, but they start looking into the aging population, which is going to be exponentially higher. But the things that we do for the aging population can then turn around and help a younger generation if we're creating more. I mean, it's a holistic approach, but until they get over here and see it on a consistent basis and actually really understand it, we'll kind of be in the same cycle.
Richard, I'm curious what your perspective on this issue is.
Well, I certainly think we can learn from one another. Durango's been faced with a homeless challenge this past spring and summer, and I think we're both city and county are smarter as a result of having gone through a summer of this. We're much more appreciative of the depth of the problem, but and we know that homelessness is an issue in many other communities in the state, and perhaps by sharing some best practices and some experiences, the smaller communities and outlying corners of the state, such as Durango, can benefit from what's happened in larger areas.
And I think these, I'm sorry, Jay, I think these governor candidates should ask themselves not only what can they gain if they did visit other parts of the state, but what can we lose if they don't? Mm-hmm. You know, what is at stake here? Because sooner or later, the paradigm is going to shift, the shift is going to happen. And I think that if we can get in front of it, then we're more likely to be prepared for that shift.
So I've often wondered what kind of policy is the J-curve of K through 12 funding. And the J-curve contemplates that smaller communities need to be funded at a higher level, and large communities need to be funded at a somewhat higher level, and then there are communities in between that are supposedly the Goldilocks level that can be funded at a lower level. Those often tend to be rural communities. So I have often wondered what kind of policy this funding disparity is, in particular where you've got more metro communities with a higher relative income, and folks are more able to support a mill levy override than the rural communities. It even widens the disparity. I've always thought that was curious statecraft. Renee, do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I know in Craig, whenever we look at a mill levy, it's always voted down. And it's, our community talks about what our school needs to be doing for education, and the test scores, but yet that funding isn't there, and we've actually lost funding because we have lost enough students to, a Christian school, as well as a lot of homeschoolers now, and then actually going to school of choice. So therefore, our school funding is actually less because there's less pupils to bring into the district.
And I think that's important in the sense of economic development, in that if CEOs are looking to bring corporations, one of the very first things they're going to look at are the schools. And can my kid get a good education? And if I bring a workforce here, will they be happy with it? And I mean, it's, we're 44th in the nation in average teacher salary. In Carbondale, the average median income is $60,000. The average housing price is $450,000. How are they going to get teachers to live there and move there when they can't even afford to live there? I think the stat is 95% of teachers can't afford the cost of living. So we need to figure out a funding mechanism if we want to drive economic development, and if we know schools are an important factor in it, we have to figure out a way to fund it appropriately.
And that's the conundrum, isn't it? We know that companies make relocation and expansion decisions based on the quality of K through 16 education. And if rural communities are falling behind, how are they going to catch up from an economic development standpoint, Tonya?
It's going to be tough, and I'm just going to speak from, my personal experience. I've been in rural Colorado for 18 months, and I accepted the job without looking into the school system. Shame on me, but I still would have moved to Montrose. But I believe that someone with a 5-year-old son who we would have rethought if we had known about the funding that the school systems and so forth get. And not only that, it's not just the funding. Are we educating based on the environment that they're in? So a rural education may look a little different. These are some of these kids are 3rd and 4th generation farmers. What tools are we giving them so that they can take their farms to the next level? Are we getting granular in that way when we think about education and what education should look like in our communities? And I'm sorry, I probably didn't answer your question.
Jay, I think there's an opportunity here to have some collaborative efforts between the K through 12 programs and then the junior colleges and four-year colleges that are in a community, or even just beyond a community. I think if we put our heads together, I think we could come up with some ways that not only their teaching programs, but other programs and classes that are being offered at the college level could well play a positive role in a K through 12 classroom environment as well.
So there's an interesting phenomenon occurring in the particularly rural areas where you've got the free agents, folks who are working for a large company who could work anywhere on the planet, who are choosing to work in some of these areas that have a lower cost of living, but one of the bottlenecks or impediments may be the quality of K through 12 education, or maybe other factors that could be impacted by a governor. What are you guys seeing in terms of these free agents in your communities? Jerry?
Well, with our company, we have a lot of people that work remotely and in different areas. And if I understand this right, is that where the paycheck is cut, that impacts that community, but their census data is different. And that creates confusion as to a lot of things, potential employers looking into that area, what's the workforce level, what's the census data. So I think that's something that would need to be cleared up as we move forward in economic development issues, so we can give true accounting of those issues.
Renee, what are you seeing? Or do you guys in Craig, or is it in Steamboat, are you seeing some of these the free agents moving in?
We're really not in Craig. I mean, not so much. Probably Steamboat though, but we're not. Sorry.
Well, and surely in Durango and Montrose, you're seeing this.
And many most of our new arrivals want to be active. They want to be outside. And in Durango, we've taken quite a few steps to. We've got a very nice system of trails that surround the community that are easily accessible. And we've got a lot of bike riders, and so we have a lot of paths that are properly marked and such. And so while the numbers are low, the population is relatively low. I think the GOCO funding has been a great help in Durango. It's really attracted individuals who are earning higher salaries that are being paid in bigger metropolitan areas and able to live in Durango, and they love riding their bike and walking.
I think in Montrose, it's similar. I mean, we definitely have the outdoor attractions to attract these so-called free agents. But one of the things that I would definitely like to see the new governor do is work with the local municipalities to explain to them the importance of shopping local, buying local. Because when you find these folks who are free agents, they can work remotely. They're ordering on Amazon instead of going down to their local Walmart or hardware store. And what we're seeing is our dollars are leaving the communities that we live in. And the average person is not aware that when you order online, those dollars are going to the majority of those dollars are going to wherever that Amazon location is. But when you go into your local Walmart and you even place an order there or go in the store and buy it, guess what? That's employing people. Those tax dollars are staying there. And so I think it will not only benefit the rural communities by that sort of education, but the state as a whole. And I'm finding more and more with my staff and people that I interact with that, I just bought all my Christmas presents online and they're being delivered. That's thousands of dollars. And then that multiplies into tens of thousands of dollars that are leaving our community. And so I believe educating folks on those things is important.
Well, I can say that here in the Grand Valley, we are certainly seeing a whole lot of people move in from the Front Range because, frankly, they're making a healthy wage, but still can't afford the cost of living in that community that continues to grow and become more and more expensive to exist. And so I think that's a phenomenon that's real in our communities and will probably continue. I want to transition now from a high level view that we've taken at the state and the tale of two states to individual communities and the issues that are important to these communities. And I want to start with Craig, that has a high reliance on coal jobs and coal extraction, and as we all know, whether it's from regulation or market changes, coal is in a rough place, and its future is very uncertain. Renee, talk to us about how that affects Craig.
Okay, it affects Craig a lot. And I would say when I was just talking about losing, a couple thousand people from the community, it really has been related to the coal, the energy-related positions. Tri-State G&T right now is looking at, there's going to be one of their towers that go down in 2025. And when that does happen, it's definitely going to change the employment that they have as well as the aging part of it. But we are so reliant upon coal, and a lot of groups and the government entities, and Craig is really looking at diversifying, and they're working together and trying to figure out what that answer is, and definitely thinking about how the governor could help with economic development. Bringing that into our community would be huge. But we do have, beautiful blue skies. We have trails. We have a lot of hiking and snowmobiling and four-wheeling and rafting. But the coal industry, if it really does go away, which it really does look like with regulations that will eventually end up happening, probably Craig will, if we don't come up with diversifying quickly, we are going to really struggle.
There are another number of communities on the Western Slope in a very similar place as Craig. So how does the governor move the needle on this issue?
Well, one of the things, as a former editor in Craig, that when we talk about this, we editorialized a bunch at the time, is the need to diversify. And it's a little unfortunate that we've come to a point that we might lose an industry that could almost wipe out a community without ever adhering to it. So I think we're always going to have these benchmarks in every community that's really reliant upon it. And unless we start developing programs long term that's continually looking at those aspects, we're going to keep coming to these problems with small rural communities, regardless of industry. Like, it just has felt like when you were talking about it, I just was like, you just get frustrated because you can see it coming so often, but we just kind of, the communities themselves are so focused on what's there, and maybe that's where the governors come in and say we need to really, because you have economic development teams that are talking about it, but they need resources and they need ways to push it forward.
I think it would help if, there's something coming down the pipeline that the governor would be talking with those communities to make us aware of what those policies would be, so that, and help us with resources to be able to get past it and still really basically stay alive.
Tonya, in Montrose, you've got some surrounding areas with a lot of extraction. How are you guys? What are you guys seeing? What do you think the governor could do?
I think that these two brought it up, is that start a dialogue. I mean, that's really probably the most important, and to show that there are options. These communities can survive if we start the dialogue and brainstorm and get people scared enough. I think that my concern is we're not, like you said, you're not concerned when you start editorializing these things and you're talking about it until it becomes a reality. And if we can start these conversations early and bring them to the forefront, then I believe that these communities will have some hope. And so whomever comes in as the next governor, I believe that if he started the conversations, then that would definitely help and put us in a better position.
And I think my only fear with that is we need to get past the point of conversation. Conversations need to lead to an end. There needs to be a roadmap to success that can be replicated in other similar communities. And that's kind of, I feel like we stall, like we talk, that's my frustration is, hey, we have a problem.
Yeah, and I don't
And it
disagree
stops.
with that.
Yeah,
I
but it's
believe
the
you're
roadmap.
right. It's start the conversation and then have a roadmap
Yeah.
to success. Where we're going to go from here.
Well, and what a lot of the solutions say, hey, you've been mining coal your whole life, and your family's been mining coal for generations. Now you need to be a computer programmer. Is that kind of job training or retraining? Is that work? Is that something that we can just plug and play? Renee, what do you think?
I think it would be a completely different mindset. And excuse me, I think about back to the conversation about the education and how you were talking about, so we'll talk about a great-grandfather and a grandfather and uncles and dads and brothers, and they graduate high school and that's what they do. They go work in the coal mine because truly your rate of pay is good, but continuing the education really is not a priority because they can stay right there in the community they grew up in, which they choose to do, and then they don't leave. So let's transition to Roaring Fork and Glenwood Springs, and one of the larger issues we discussed earlier was workforce and availability of workforce, and what you're seeing, Jerry, is a changing demographic and aging population. Frame that issue for us.
Well, I'm going to read some stats off because I think they're important, but the State Demography Office estimates Colorado will have more than 1.2 million residents age 65 or over by 2030. Garfield County senior population is expected to decrease from 6,500 to 14,000 in that same time frame, so we're more than double. Most of Garfield County senior services are free at a low cost, but 53% of seniors who used services last year received an annual income of less than $14,000. The good news is in 2015, the General Assembly enacted House Bill 15103, creating the Strategic Action Planning Group. In January, Governor Hickenlooper named someone to that group. My question is, I hope that we continue moving those things forward and ensuring that we have that, but I also think I would challenge whoever the governor is to look at the blue zone studies and look at creating blue zone communities in Colorado. Colorado does not have any blue zone communities. Other states do, and blue zones are these, based off of research of the 5 communities in the world that have the longest living populations. And it's when you look at it, like going back to that holistic thing, everything that they do in these blue zones would be beneficial in all aspects of our community. Being naturally active, creating family and friend groups, being healthier eating, things that would drive economic development to there, that would improve educational aspects. It's a very tangible thing that has shown success in the United States and around the world that we could be doing that could help rural communities. And that'd be my challenge. I'd like to know why we couldn't do that.
Right, and I think that one of the things that we've learned through this discussion is that the Front Range is growing so rapidly that the Colorado you were promised if you move to the state is pretty can be 6-7 hours away if you're stuck on I-70. And so one of the attraction points I think for communities like Durango, like Montrose, like Glenwood, Grand Junction and Craig is the ability to access outdoors. Richard, I wonder if you could touch on how Durango is reacting.
Well, I think we all know that lifestyle is so important. Colorado generally has that over and over again, but you should have in your community, I think, some coffee shops. We're very fortunate to have public radio. We've got a river where there are recreational opportunities, and so we're really attracting individuals who may still be in their late 40s or early 50s, and may have children in school, but who don't want to wait to live in an attractive part of the country, and they are bringing their jobs with them using a laptop and an occasional airline ticket. And by the way, I'd very much enjoy having a governor who could bring down airline fares for these smaller communities within the state. I think that would be a wonderful step forward. But we're fortunate to be developing an appealing lifestyle, an attractive lifestyle, and that's made quite a difference.
So I want to transition to another issue that unites these Western Colorado communities, and that is an extraordinary cost of healthcare. Mesa County in particular has the 9th highest hospital pricing for the privately insured in the nation. And that issue spans all of our communities. We, for low income and low cost of living, we have extraordinarily high healthcare costs driven by a variety of factors, including inability to recruit doctors into these areas, but also, I think some would say, some predatory pricing because of lack of competition. So we've certainly seen that in this community, and it's like an added tax on every company that wants to do business here. If you have to buy health insurance here, it's more expensive, and if you end up in the hospital, God forbid, it can drive you to bankruptcy. It's a real problem nationwide, but we're getting particularly hit out here in Western Colorado. And so, Tanya, I wonder if you could touch on what you guys are experiencing in Montrose.
I can give you a real life story that just happened 2 weeks ago. A local resident got really ill, and she didn't know what to do. So she went into the ER. Does not have health insurance. This is someone who her household income is less than $50,000, employed individual, and she was in the hospital for less than 48 hours and got out with an $18,000 bill. That's debilitating. That hurts to the core of a person who is working every single day and contributing to our community.
And we hear these stories nationwide, but why Western Colorado? Is it we're separately rated, or we're rated with the resort communities? Is it the inability to bring doctors in? Is it a lack of competition? How can a governor of the state move the needle on the extraordinary cost of health care out here? Jerry, Renee, any thoughts?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I wish I did. I would if I could provide that information to the governor, other than please look into it, because it is very problematic for employers, for individuals, for the communities as a whole. And I know that the healthcare providers, they don't like being painted with that brush, but at the same time there are higher costs for them as well. And so that is something that needs to be looked into. I claim to have a lot of answers. That's one I don't have. So.
And I think we're going to be struggling with that for years, and the next governor is going to be dealing with that one.
Mm-hmm.
I want to transition to now our friends in Montrose, which is, we've got an income inequality in this community that I think is endemic of any community but a resort community. And how's it affecting Montrose and folks that are just trying to get by?
I think the inequities that you're speaking of are they are played out in the scenario I just gave you regarding healthcare. This is an individual who does go to work 5 days a week, 40 hours, who can't afford healthcare, but yet the housing, the grocery stores, all the things that we need to sustain, life, folks can come down from Telluride, and we love it when they do, but they don't care how much a gallon of milk costs, they're just picking the milk up. And so I think when we're in these communities that are hoping and praying and wanting these folks to come in and spend, lots of money with us, they're not looking at the residents who are spending money all year long. Perfect example is there was not a lot of snow in Telluride this past year. I've been here for 18 months. They told me that, it snows in Colorado, it's beautiful, and the summers are cool. I haven't seen that yet. But the snow, not having a lot of snow impacted Montrose in ways that I never thought was even possible. And the Main Street shop owners, we were getting calls saying, we're so slow, we're struggling, there's no dollars coming in, because guess what? I'm not going to go spend $35 on a t-shirt. But when the tourists aren't coming in to spend $35 on a t-shirt, then the shops are hurting. And so I think that inequity plays out in so many ways, and we want Main Street to make a lot of money. We want these businesses to be profitable, but I believe if we took a holistic approach and looked at it from all year, around, how these inequities could play out when we're not getting money from the resort communities would play a huge part.
Jay, we should know more about how wage earners at different levels are doing. We all know the stock market is quite strong. 50% of Americans have stocks and equities, but 50% don't. And we should be doing more with some research and statistics to have a better idea of what other income levels are struggling with and doing, and what opportunities they might have.
Well, and access to capital and capital markets in these communities is always going to be some kind of an impediment where most VC money and large investment opportunities exist in the Front Range just don't make their way out to Western Colorado. I think as far as I've seen. Are you guys seeing anything different in terms of access to capital markets?
No.
I don't think anyone's having that conversation. I mean, I'm just glad you brought it up, because the average entrepreneur in rural Colorado, they are not even thinking about venture capitalists and access to capital, because they're not made aware of that.
Well, we've had a couple of cases of sort of startups that in Durango that then have sold and moved on, and we sort of accept that. But a wonderful little nutrition bar for dogs that was a result of a climber who with his dog, who noticed his dog was exhausted partway through this climb, and so came up with a bit of an energy bar. But he eventually, of course, sold in order to get bigger. And then we had a credit card processor who graduated of Fort Lewis College, who very innovative, and that company is eventually sold. So we're well aware that when we see these sorts of things start up locally, that they're not going to be with us for any length of time. That's the best we can do.
Well, we're just about out of time here in the Rocky Mountain PBS studio at Colorado Mesa University. I want to thank my fellow colleagues for their time and travels, and for bringing focus and resolution to these important rural issues. It's my sincere hope that viewers today tune into the Colorado rural debate between Jared Polis and Walker Stapleton, and that this discussion will have enriched Colorado's discussion about bridging the rural-urban divide. I'm Jay Seaton, the Grand Junction Daily Sentinel publisher, and good evening, and we'll see you all on October 6th.